I would like to start by asking you a question. Behind me you see two images. Take a quick look. And if you prefer image 1, please raise your hand. If you prefer image 2, please raise your hand. Okay, I think that is roughly 50-50. Perfect. Let me ask you again. What about now? Who prefers image 1? Who prefers image 2? Okay. I don't know if you noticed some opinions just shifted a bit. Today I want to talk about this very phenomena, to answer two questions. First, can AI create art, which is an aesthetic question? And second, should AI create art, which is an ethical question? And I have to warn you, these two questions are quite hard to untangle, but I believe they are of the biggest of importance because art and culture, they are our face, they make us human. So let's get into this journey to see if our ethical and aesthetic compass is intact. Nothing less than the future of art is at stake. And let me be clear, I'm not here to defend AI. I don't believe these trillion-dollar making machines need any bodyguard. But I'm also not here to tell you what's bad about them. So let's see. Let's get back to our example from earlier. This phenomena that we just observed is commonly called the Anthropocentric Bias. Simply put, humans seem irrationally so to prefer human-made art over non-human-made art. And I have to admit, I lied to you. Both of these are actually made by humans. So we already saw our first example of this anthropocentric bias obscuring our judgment and decision-making live on stage here. But to go further, we have to take a step back. Just for a second, we should appreciate how complicated this question is in the first place, talking about art itself. How do we even assign this category? Who decides if a painting is an artwork, and so on? Katrin Misselhorn, philosopher of theoretical philosophy, wrote in her book about AI art, if art is a duck, then AI art is a rubber duck. It's a very curious sentence. What does she mean by this? What she's saying here is that there is an ontological difference between art and AI art. In other words, they are categorically different. That's what she's claiming. Just like a rubber duck, no matter how similar it might look to a real duck, is something completely different. They cannot be compared. And I'm sure this is one position you could take. But today I want to challenge this notion. And I want to argue for a more inclusive view on art and AI art. Because I believe, and I would argue, that many forms of art were actually treated similar like AI art today. And there was skepticism at first. And I want to use an example which might be the most fitting example when talking about AI art, and that is photography. What you can see here is one of the first photographies, the first photos which were made with a commercial camera, so a camera which many people have had access to. 1839 marked the point of cameras being somewhat available to the public. It is the sublime moment when photography turned from craft to art, because shortly after they would also be exhibited in museums and so on. In the same year, painter Paul de la Roche said, "From today, painting is dead." Sounds familiar? Photography faced the same skepticism, the same rejection that AI art is facing today. And it's not only aesthetic skepticism or rejection, it is also the fact that photographers at the time were deemed to be immoral people because they destroyed a whole job market for people who were very skilled and they thought no one needs them anymore. I can agree with Paul de la Roche to some degree. For paintings didn't die. I think we can all see that this form of art is still blooming. But they had to find a new artistic language, for sure. So this year, around 1839, marks a point where it was necessary to find new ways to portray and not just create what is now possible with a camera anyways. Shortly after, the artist Duchamp exhibited a piece which was supposed to question the museum as a place itself. The so-called fountain is just a regular urinal placed in a museum to ask the question, is that art? So the outrage was immense. The art world didn't respect this decision, but the message, I think, is quite clear. Everything can be art and everything can create art. But is that true? Let's follow that logic a bit. What about a child, for example? Can a child create art? A 5-year-old randomly hitting on a piano, can he create music, which we consider art? I think many people would say they can't. But Mozart was only 5 years old when he wrote this very first piece of his, which is definitely considered to be art. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. So it's not about age or maturity or agency. Maybe it's about an intention, right? Someone might say, well, but Mozart, he knew what he was doing. He had knowledge, he created something on purpose. Other children, they might not be able to do that, they don't have intention. So is the attribute that we're looking for intentionality? Do you know this picture? This is a photograph a monkey took of himself by stealing a photographer's camera. A court later ruled that the very moment of pressing the shutter is sufficient to call the monkey the artist. The photographer wanted to copyright this image, he wanted to make money with it, and he claimed, no, I looked at all the pictures I took, it's like a curational effort, and I decided this picture is valuable, so I wanted to exhibit it because it's a great picture. But the court ruled that the accident actually created the art and not the intention. The fact is also that this picture went into public domain because the monkey would be the author of this picture, but as a monkey is legally an object can hardly have any property, right? So this is the reason why I can just show this picture like this without any problems, because it is now in public domain. So let me recap. It was not the intention that created this art piece, but an accident. So you can see, even if we ignore AI for now, art is very difficult to categorize. And I made a fascinating discovery last year about how we perceive AI art. And it all goes back to this man, Alan Turing, computer scientist, born in 1912. He invented the so-called Turing test, a mechanism to determine if a machine should be considered intelligent or not, without ever defining what intelligence even means. His test is quite simple. You just have one human talk to two entities, a human and a computer. And if the human cannot tell which of the two was the human and which was the computer, you must, and this is the imperative of the Turing test, must consider this computer intelligent. Modern computers, by the way, beat this test quite easily. You can make of this what you want. But on surface level, this has nothing to do with art, right? But isn't the way we look at AI art today precisely like this? Is our gaze at a AI-generated content not tainted by us trying to find the trickery to see if it's a real or an AI-generated image? Is our metric not to see if AI is able to fool us into thinking that it's not AI art? So I think this is crucial, and this is the most important point I want to make today. When we look at AI art, I would argue that what we are doing is similar to an aesthetic Turing test. Like smoke in the air, like a magic trick, we are only asking, can we see the difference? And I think it's obvious why this is so unfortunate, right? Because AI can create so many things. It can create something that we cannot create as humans. So all of these things are completely disregarded if we use this mechanism of valuing this medium. So let's look at some examples, at some attributes that AI art has. I brought two ideas that I think are very, very interesting about AI art. First of all, the creative power from them comes often from misreading and misunderstanding us. And the second point, which follows from the first point, is that AI art is mostly shaped by limitations. But I will explain that in a minute. Let's start with point one. I brought you a little picture here. I generated a Waldo picture. The goal, of course, is to find Waldo. I don't know if you can find him. I don't think we can argue that this is not a Where's Waldo picture, right? It looks like one. I think it is one. But the fact that to make Waldo in the middle of the picture so large that we can spot him in a millisecond shows such a profound misunderstanding of the very nature of the task itself that you could even argue, did the machine even understand what it was creating at all? For artists, this is of course a challenge. You have a tool which doesn't really understand you. You have a tool which doesn't actually know what you want to do. But it also brings some opportunities. Maybe never in history a human thought about the fact of creating a Waldo picture where Waldo is so large, comically large in the middle, that you can just spot him immediately. Maybe you need this kind of misunderstanding to get to that point. The associations that go from left to right, maybe a human wouldn't make, we can use AI to get there. But if we combine many misunderstandings, I think we can get to my second point, which is about limitations. Airhead was the first ever generated short film with AI, made by Sora from OpenAI in 2024. It's a 1 to 2 minute short clip of a man who has a balloon instead of a head. It's a dreamy, surreal little film. But much more interesting than this film is what the director said about this film afterwards. He said they generated so much they could only use 0.3% of the stuff they generated. And even more, they had to rewrite the whole script. They couldn't use any of the stories, the ideas they wrote in the script. They had to go back and change everything regarding from what the AI was actually giving them. And I think here we have to be very, very careful, because what we see here now is AI imposing its own logic onto our creations. By its limitations, it basically shapes what it can even do, what we can do. So I would argue we need to be a bit careful here and see that we still create ourselves and not only use what AI can do. But now, 2025, AI is already like a message in a bottle floating through the internet, like a time capsule from the future, showing us how art might look like, giving us a little glimpse. Everyone can create with this technology. Everyone who has a computer can. It is quite interesting, and I would even argue something like hyper-subversion is happening there. I can create an artwork, I can post it, and all of you can react to that artwork in mere minutes or hours. Like in a petri dish, art is growing in front of our very eyes in real time. But it might sound a bit surprising saying this about AI art, because my job is also to be quite critical of it. But I do think there's a potential for it to be a quite empowering, democratic medium where everyone can create. Isn't there something liberating about the fact that you create an image and it's not only your image, but it's just a tiny puzzle piece in an ongoing aesthetic conversation? But of course, we also have to be critical of it. And I am against a cannibalization of art by AI completely, of course. AI, how it is produced at the moment, steals data, exploits workers, and spends more money than some cities or countries. And when we think about AI in the job market, it might lead to de-skilling, so us losing some skills we used to have. It creates job insecurity, and all the other symptoms of art being eaten up by late capitalism. So I want to end with a story. Last year, 2024, I went to Mannheim to give a lecture there about this very topic, about AI and art. And I talked about the aesthetic Turing test and some other things. Later that day, I walked through the city, and I saw a burger restaurant with bright neon posters in the windows of cheeseburgers and bacon burgers, hyper stylized in nearly perfectly shaped forms. It was clearly AI generated, no doubts about it. Don't ask me how I know it, I just did. And next to me there was a couple walking by, and the man started pointing at this restaurant and saying, "Look, the food looks the best there, let's go there and eat there." And for a brief second, I understood all the people who are so vehemently against AI in any form of content. I wanted to take them and shake them and say, "No, don't be tricked, this is not actually how the food will look like." But I didn't. But I'm curious about the future, what it will bring. Let's wait, maybe let's see, until AI art and all of these debates are not only held on stages and lecture halls and classes, but are solved in front of a burger store. Thank you very much.